And several times I've heard the story that the drilling company has run into oil in Western Australia, in places you wouldn't expect. And then when they go through that process, every time that story goes, they get paid out, there's non-disclosure agreements, and things are capped and they're put away. G'day folks, Mark here again. I want to have another bit of a chat about some of the political stuff that's going on in Western Australia, or Australia more to the point. And I suppose it's all in reference to our gun stuff and the anti-gun laws that are moving in more and more and more so. We have the federal stuff that's coming in, and some states are adopting it, some states are resisting, and there's more of this game of I suppose a little bit of division in the firearm community through the fact that, well, our state's good and your state got hit hard, so it's better to live in this part of the world than that part of the world, sort of stuff, which is, listen, I suppose what I'd say is, wake up. There's, some at this moment, some of those states will have more resistance, but it only takes one incident in the next stage of your government or whatever it is, and it's all going in the same path. So let's stop this. Oh, it's going to be better over here than it is there, or that you guys didn't try hard enough, or you deserve that because you voted them in, or all that sort of rubbish. It's always been heading in the same direction. It goes at different rates and things, but we know where there are certain sections of our world want to take it, and they will get there at the rate they're going, the death of 1,000 cuts. So there's several things that I've sort of suggested over time. Certainly a Bill of Rights, a Charter of Rights, all that sort of stuff is something that, may be able to help in that sort of place. The whole system is a mess without any question whatsoever. But the main thing to do, really, the biggest thing we can do apart from being positive in our sport, to present firearms in a more positive fashion, to let the community know about us more and that sort of stuff in a positive fashion, is finding common ground with the rest of our community. And that is, people who might feel they're negative anti-gun, or they call you redneck, or they are full lefties, or whatever it is. There is a degree of the gone too far, I suppose you'd call them the unsavable, but there is a whole heap of people that are psyoped or just got the blinkers on, or whatever reason can't see things. So us being able to find ways of not only presenting ourselves well, but wake them up to what's obvious. And there is one of those situations that's happening again right now. We had the free speech attack, that sort of stuff, and the different things that the government up to, where there was something that they were, if not involved, then were let happen, and it was their dropping the ball. And that's the likes of Bondi, and then they blamed everyone else for it, and then a whole heap of rules have come in which are very conveniently suited what happened. But there's right now the fuel crisis that is across the country, that our government, and we've still got in Western Australia, government members are saying, no, there's nothing to see here, there's nothing wrong that side of things, it's just all the panic buying and things that are causing this issue, which is a ludicrous thing to say, don't get me wrong. But there is also the situation of how we got to this place. And that is something that you can look at through, and this is not a conservative versus liberal way of doing things, or liberal's a confusing word to use in Australia, because our liberal government is supposedly, our Liberal Party is supposedly our Conservative Party. For those people that don't, it does get confusing. But really we have the Uni Party, and that, as I explained last week, is more driven out of the fact that our political class, our unelected government, is such a big part of Australia. It's also where most our politicians come from. We're moving into more people who are employed by the government than not employed by the government, whether indirectly or directly. But also a lot of the political class never get involved in the world. They don't understand the world in the working class fashion, in even the business class fashion. They don't understand it in that sort of level. They live in a different political class, so they don't think the same way. In some cases, even despise the country folk, the working folk, the blue collar folk, because that's a problem of their culture, which has got to see things very inaccurately. But that's where our decisions are coming from. And the fuel, and that's, like I said, I suppose I'll reiterate there, when people see the minister making these decisions, the ministers aren't making decisions. They're being advised and taking the sort of responsibility, not that there's any accountability in government anyway, but they're taking the shine or the positive press for it, for votes. They're also taking the negative when it goes badly. But the thought that they're making the decisions by themselves is foolish. They sit on thousands of people, areas of government where there's all sorts of advisors, all sorts of administrators, all sorts of people paid ranging from $100,000 a year to $1 million a year in billion-dollar sections of our government that are actually making these decisions, and where the logic comes from. So the likes of our fuel crisis at the moment, we can go on about the world politics and the US and Trump and what they're up to there with Iran, and there's the very there's the oppressors and oppressed side of that conversation. There's the neocons and the peace side of that conversation. There's so many bits and pieces. The Arabs have always been fighting each other. There's lots of things you can bring into. I'm not going to get into that conversation. The more I try and understand it, the harder it gets to actually see things. We're not the people making decisions. We don't know the information they're working with. And really we have the media or the spin on one side of other things or the other to make sense of things. So very complicated. So I'm not going to enter into that conversation. But I'll come back to our world and, well, the fuel crisis is real. And I'm sure that there should be a lot of the world that are just looking at us Aussies and going, you bloody idiots. That is just the stupidest situation. We are, I think, even now, even though we don't do much with our natural resources over here in the way of using the potential oil and fuel oil and gas and natural gas that we have here, we're only actually tapping a bit of it, which we give 50% of it away to multinational fuel companies for some reason, which I haven't found out. I haven't bothered to ask that. I've just heard it a lot of times. We don't charge them enough for it and they pay no tax to it, which is absurd. Third biggest supplier in the world. The other big suppliers in the world, I think there's Norway and the Arab Emirates I don't know where they are all over the world. I haven't done the research, I'm sorry, but there are large oil producers in the world for fuel oil side of things. They basically, so fossil fuels, they in those countries tend to get a dividend from what they sell, a reasonable dividend of what they sell, which goes to the country. Now, I don't know how it's distributed. I think in some countries it actually is distributed to the population in various forms. In other countries it obviously pays for your healthcare, or it pays for some jobs that our taxes pay for, it pays for. And that's how it works. It's resources your country is selling, so it should, in some form or other, make your country, your people, richer. Whether it's less tax or better facilities or money in your bank in some form or other. Not in Australia at all. That doesn't happen at all. We're really not doing that, which is absurd. I get into what I was saying is there's a lot we don't use. I'll explain that a little bit more shortly. But when you simply go through that process there, you realise, okay, there's a major rort in play here. And this will be done through the political class and the corporations which have sold each other out. We all know the politicians end up with advisory jobs, or they end up with jobs, high-paying jobs in amongst these. Certainly West Australian politicians have ended up with high-paying jobs immediately out of office through there. I don't know, and I haven't done the research, but what you're going to find is that also some of the staffing side of things, where in our unelected politicians, or not politicians, unelected political servants that are paid very well for while they're here, also end up in those places. And this will be through the backroom, boardroom deals where some of this stuff happens. And it's stuff that we really should be stopping. And this isn't the Labor Party, although I would say it's quantifiably worse when the Labor Party are in power, because they're more in sync with the staffing side of that, with the bureaucratic side of our Australia. But it's not much different with the Liberal side of things. In all honesty, we've all seen that. The decisions are made there too. And there's some very wealthy Liberal side of things that do the same sort of stuff, but it's not quite as fluent on that sort of level. So it is very much a system problem rather than trying to say one party's a lot better than the other party by any means. But I want to go into a couple of levels further than that. One is the the process that I'm sure most people are aware, but the reason we're actually having a crisis. And what should be, with the money side of things that I'm saying there, is oil prices going up should not be a negative to Australia if we're making money out of the process. If Australians are making money, we get more money. We have an oil crisis. Okay, there is a strait where a lot of oil comes through. That's obviously a pretty precious situation, and it is definitely being leveraged to the maximum to create that problem. But there should be enough resources to fill that up with what we have through this world. But we're not doing it that way as a world. As a country, because those prices have gone up, we should be benefiting from that, like the corporations are. In a lot of cases, you'd say that oil corporations, the big gas companies, the big fuel companies, are actually price gouging. They put the price up before they ran into the restrictions. I presume there's a logic to the fact that they know it's going to be more expensive, so trying to cover that. It doesn't seem to work that way when the prices go down, so why does it go up? You know, they're just taking a slice from both ends, or a piece of both pieces of the cake. They want to take as much as they can because they're greedy corporations. No shocks there. It's the other major problem with Australia. Our political class and our corporate class are people who don't see us, the workers, as anything other than a way to make money. They don't feel responsibility because we don't actually have a set of rules to hold them in line well enough. Hence the Bill of Rights side of things and that argument. But that situation, we should be making more money. We're not. The other detail is that we should have, there's an international standard that says we should have 90 days of stored fuel. So we store 90 days of fuel, particularly diesel fuel. It's what your whole country runs on. It's what the trucks get across and the trains move on. Everything moves on. There's diesel is what we actually run on. We should have 90 days of that. We got down to less than 30 days without any crisis going on. When you research that, you'll find that the school teacher, or no, I shouldn't say school teacher, the student sort of level of mentality of the energy minister saying that would just cost too much to do that. We can't have that amount of fuel. It would just cost too much. This is that teenager who's just moved into a house and trying to work out a budget for themselves, and they haven't figured out that you've got to save up to pay your rent. You've got to make sure you got that money in the account so you can pay your rent, because no, it was easier to spend this, and I preferred to go out on a Friday night and I did this, so now I can't pay my rent, so I have to go to my parents and get money. Well, that's exactly the same way that our energy minister, or let's say, as I've expressed before, our energy department have decided to do it. No, we don't need to spend that money because it'll never happen, and no, we'll cope. And listen, no, you can't borrow fuel. It needs to be shipped across the way we're doing it, because we're not using our own resources. They need to be shipped across. Very easy to fix. Have it set up there so it's done. It's not spent money. If you do it properly, it just stays in there. Once you get it to that level, then you can keep on changing it over. It is just sitting there. But no, they wanted to spend that money instead because they wanted to go out and have a party on Friday night. That sort of logic is what our government is running with. And let's be clear about this. I'm not just blaming our Labor Party, I'm blaming our Uni Party for that process, because that's been for many years that reserve has not been kept up. That's not a theological standard, that's an international standard set by other nations to say that's what you're going to need to get around problems that might happen just like this. So that's a grave negative to how it's being run. Another clue that they need people in charge of them. They don't understand how the rest of this world works. This is a case of they live in a political class bubble, which they don't really get it. It's stuff that doesn't really matter to them. I would not put it past them also to the fact that, if we run into a bit of a crisis, then that'll get them to go down the electric car path, because that's where they should have been. We're trying to convince them, so let's use this as a crisis. Well, if you'd gone electric, that would have fixed the problem, wouldn't it? Obviously a load of rubbish. Obviously comes out of a bubble who drive around electric cars in the little community they live in, doesn't understand about trucks backward and forwards the country, doesn't understand about farming, doesn't understand about mining, doesn't understand about most things. But that's more the point. And then the user crisis, you can see that sort of stuff. I'm not saying that's the case, but we certainly are hearing more of those things. And for the people with their EVs and their hybrids and that sort of stuff, no doubt a fair few of them are crowing as to how smart their decision is right now, because it seems so terrible for such a long time. So now they have a moment to say, oh, look what I've got. I don't need to worry about it. So those are things that are a setup. It's Done in some senses, I would believe, in some senses it's done in the fact of we don't need this anyway, and it would be better if we're electric, so it didn't matter. A nonsensical comment, and I suppose I'll touch into that process a little bit. Australia is probably the least suited to a real EV setup. We're the largest island. We have the biggest states in the world. We are a big thing. We are pretty much the size of USA with 1/10 of the people. I haven't done the population maths, but we're spread out a long, long way. So our transport system, our resources system, even our energy system needs to have a whole heap of fossil fuels to make it dependent. That is something that for people who have gone this other way and think, oh, it's got to be renewable, we can't use the fossil fuels. I understand fossil fuels are not going to last forever. That's for sure. They've got a long way to go before they get there. And if we put the effort into being efficient at how we use them, and then more efficient about how we also financially operate things, out of being efficient at how we use what we've got, that will give us a chance to develop into something that works. Not wind turbines that never pay for themselves before they're worn out. Not solar farms that pollute themselves and cause all sorts of issues. These are really negative things. At another massive corporate level, it's about making money to them who are selling these parts, and very little about actually trying to save the earth. I won't get too far into that. Yes, there are positives in the renewable side of things, but until we do it properly in the fossil fuel side of things, we aren't even engaged in the game properly. We'll get there, and obviously nuclear is a place that we should be in a lot of places also. But the last bit I wanted to say on that conversation as to how ridiculous situation this is that Australia is full of, and I don't know the level of it by any means, but fossil fuels, which we could be using and generating our own. We've shut down a whole heap of refineries out of they needed money spent on them, same sort of thing. They needed upgrade and this sort of stuff, so we're able to shut it down, move on, don't look the other way. We'll just get our fuel in from elsewhere. We've only got 2 refineries left in Australia. So an absurd situation for a country so full of resources. Another one of those stupid decisions that, be it corporate/government level, have made those decisions rather than spending the money. We can't even afford to spend money on proper railway tracks and roads around here apart from the middle of the city, is the way it's actually happening in Australia. Getting worse and worse and worse. That's probably a pretty commonplace all over the world. And that's probably through the fact that our banking system is a mess and there's so much money owed to the bankers, the big bankers of the world by all countries, that it's getting hard for them to do things. But that's another conversation. But here's the last bit of this conversation. I've forgotten how many it is. It's 200 billion barrels of oil, whatever it is, in reserves in South Australia, we're not touching. So I think most of the world should know that we do have a lot in South Australia. But the question is, I would say, is what I've heard of recently and in time gone by also, is that there's a lot more in Western Australia than most people realise. I've heard for years now stories that have come through. Some might be the same story, some may be fabricated, some are definitely real, where they have exploration drilling for water, tapping for water to see where artesian wells or whatever they're drilling that water. And several times I've heard the story that the drilling company has run into oil in Western Australia, in places you wouldn't expect. And then when they go through that process, every time that story goes, they get paid out, there's non-disclosure agreements and things are capped and they're put away. It's not made public whatsoever. So there is, I can't tell you where they are, they've been non-disclosure agreements, but I've certainly heard people who, second hand is as close as I've got, sometimes it's fourth hand, but where they actually have drilling. And when you look at the country and you know the age of this country, look at the land and the age of this country, you realise why the hell not? We are a very large spot. There's lots of open spaces around here. There is very, very, very little research in the way of drilling that's actually done in the way of to explore for natural gas or for oil or that sort of stuff. There is the strongest possibility, well, I'd say there's infinite, what am I trying to say? There is no possibility, there's not massive amount more of fuel resources, of fossil fuels that are not under Australia. We're not even looking for them. To all I can see, we're being discouraged to not look for them or to not own up to them. Now, these are for reasons I can only presume, but we should be, in all senses, if not then one of the richest countries in the world with the highest standard of living and most of our bills paid if we did this thing properly. This is something that could honestly be in Australia if we get control of the ship. We're not in control of the ship. I don't believe our government's in control of the ship, but they're certainly the intermediate. They're certainly the steering rod that goes between what's controlling us and what and us. So if we get control of them, we may be there's a strong chance of severing the rest of that, because we are resource rich and we should be a lot richer people. This should be a lot easier. Life should be easier. It's easy enough, I suppose some would say, compared to 300 years ago, but this shouldn't be as much debt and as much kept in, basically working as slaves to pay the banks, to pay the government, to do what we're doing. Anyway, that's that one there. That's a bit segued and fractured. It really comes into the simple logic of this is one of those situations where even your greenie mates or your lefty mates can see that, okay, this is an issue. This is something. Okay, in the middle of that bubble there where they really ride their e-scooter to work and back, they have their Tesla to drive out to the suburbs and back, and don't understand it at all. Okay, you might not be able to have that conversation. That conversation should come to them, but because this country is in a lot of trouble at the moment, and worldwide politics, there's a lot more to go on there. So this crisis is going to get worse before it gets better. But let's do the government thing. Let's not let a good crisis go to waste. Let's use it to point out how inept, how disconnected, and how wrong our political class are at this moment. Anyway, guys, thanks for checking in.